Using VLOOKUP has been an Excel badge of honour for many years. But now there's the new XLOOKUP function. If you liked using VLOOKUP, then you're going to love using XLOOKUP. Let's take a look at some of the key differences. Here's a simple VLOOKUP. On the green table on the left, we've got a list of products or transactions, and they belong to different stores, but we don't know which state these stores are in, except we do because on the right here we've got a little lookup table. So with VLOOKUP, I can equals VLOOKUP, looking up the store in this whole table array it's called. I'll need to press F4 to put my dollar signs in to make it absolute cell references. The thing we're wanting, the state, is in the second column, and false gives us an exact match. Now let's do the same thing with XLOOKUP. Now it starts off the same with the lookup value, but then immediately there's a difference. So we've got, instead of one single table array, we've got two different arguments. We've got the lookup array and the return array. So the way this works is that our store name is going to be the lookup array, and our state names are going to be the return array. These options we'll come back to later, but we don't need them. That's XLOOKUP at its simplest. And hopefully when we fill down we'll get the same answers. Let's move on to looking at multiple column arrays. So here we've got a VLOOKUP which looks up the product ID in here. In this table array, has to be in the first column, as you know, and it determines which column to use by using the match function. So in this first cell, it matches the word description to description in this row of headings, and that will return 2 because it's in column 2, and then I can fill that across. But note that I've got 3 separate formulas in effect. XLOOKUP works in a little bit of a different way. I can say equals XLOOKUP. The lookup value is going to be the same, it's in C3. The lookup array is going to be the same, my ID column. But the return array doesn't have to be a single column. We can actually return all of those 3 columns at once: description, price and supplier. So when I hit enter, I get the whole answer. So with VLOOKUP, I mentioned that we had 3 separate formulas. With XLOOKUP, I've only actually got one formula, which is in cell B10, and then these are put in automatically as part of the return array. You'll notice that if I click on, say, price, it's actually grayed out. I can't alter it. It's a single formula in this cell, which I can now alter. Just an important point about column order. This is very similar to our last example. It's an XLOOKUP function. But just notice that we're actually looking up the product ID in this column. It's actually in the middle of the table, and I'm actually returning the array which is to the left of it, which you could never do within VLOOKUP. unless you did some weird thing with the choose function to return an array, but not that easy. So that's another important difference. I want to talk about using named ranges in VLOOKUP and XLOOKUP. It's not technically a difference between the two, but it's important to get this established before we move in. So with XLOOKUP, for example, I can do an XLOOKUP, and I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll name this range by selecting, going to the top left hand corner to the name box, and I'll call it, it's called store name, isn't it? I'll have to put an underscore in there because I can't put a space in a name. Enter, and I'll also name this as state. And I can actually reference those within my XLOOKUP. Equals XLOOKUP, F2, the lookup array, which is going to be this one, or I could have just typed it in actually, store name, and the other one was called state. So it makes it easier to understand your formula, and I can press enter and fill down. But I want to show you this. With this F2, I can actually refer to an array in there as well. I could type in F2 to F1000 or whatever it is, but let me name this. So click on the first store, shift control down arrow, name box, and I'll call it store. Enter. So now let's modify this. Instead of using F2, I'll use store. And look what happens when I press enter. It's a dynamic array, so I've only got the formula in the first one, and it's filled down for me. It will actually work with VLOOKUP as well. VLOOKUP, store, in, I don't know whether I've named, I have to reference a store with cell references. The column index number is 2, and we want an exact match, which is false, and that will fill down as well. It can be a bit annoying because you can't then say sort or filter this range. It won't let you, but you could make it a table first before you write your formulas. Another big difference between XLOOKUP and VLOOKUP is that XLOOKUP has got a built-in if not found argument. So with VLOOKUP, when we had this problem, when we had error messages, we used to tidy that up by doing something like putting an if error or if NA around it and saying something like store not found. So what if NA does is it does the VLOOKUP if it can, but if that results in an error, it does whatever is in the second argument, which here is store not found. Press enter, and I'm getting a much neater message. So with XLOOKUP, we don't need to wrap any formulas around because it's actually built into the function. Equals XLOOKUP. We're looking up store. Looks like I've got different versions of it. Okay, so we're looking up this column basically in the lookup array, which is those values, and the return array, which is those values. The next option is if not found. So what I'll do here is I will say store not found. Oops. Store not found. And that should work the same. So XLOOKUP had a built-in if not found. Let's talk about matching options. So with VLOOKUP, what we would need to do here is write a VLOOKUP that looks up the mark in this whole table here. We want it to return the grade in the second column. And true is the default, but let's put it in anyway. So that's an approximate match. Yeah. So with the first one, it won't make a difference because there is an exact match, 50. With the second student though, they get 59.4. So it would look for that, can't find it, so it would find the next lowest item, which is 50. And importantly, this table would actually have to be sorted in ascending order by score. So that's going to work. With XLOOKUP, we've got a bit more flexibility. We can look up the value again in the lookup array. That's the return array. If not found, well, let's just put two rabbit's ears together. That will just leave the cell empty if there's an error. And this is what I'm looking for, the match mode. So the default is exact, but we want this one. -1 is exact match or next smallest item. So if it can't find the next match, it'll find the number below it. But note, there is an option to do the one above it as well, which people used to ask for a lot. Also, there's a wildcard character match, so you can use things like asterisks and question marks to get partial matches. So let's stick with this one. And I'll deal with the search mode as well, which is the last of the arguments. The default is to search from first to last, top to bottom. You can search starting at the bottom. And these binary searches, if you've got a massive data set, you can actually make it a bit quicker by using those. But if you do, you have to sort in ascending order for your lookup array, which is interesting because that implies that that's not necessary for here. More on that later. I'll just go with the default. So hopefully that will give us the same answer as our VLOOKUP. Yes, it does. So with the search mode, I mentioned that with VLOOKUP, you must make sure that when you have a true approximate match, your table has to be sorted in numeric order for the first one. But look at this. I'm going to sort my lookup table A to Z by the grade, credit, distinction, fail. Okay, so I've messed up the order. But look at this. My VLOOKUP is now totally rubbish, but my XLOOKUP has maintained the correct result. So it's more robust in that respect. So for those of you that have used VLOOKUP, you've probably also used HLOOKUP as well, because if you had a horizontal lookup table, you actually had to use a different function, HLOOKUP. Now XLOOKUP actually does horizontal as well as vertical lookups. So it's just a question of doing exactly the same thing as we've been doing. Look up that value in this row. and return what's in this row. And defaults to exact match. So what I do need to do is put in a and that one again, same as we did with the XLOOKUP before, and that should be correct. Indeed it is. Let's get a bit more tricky. Here we have a table of data, and we type in, we choose a category, operating revenue, whatever, depreciation, and we choose a month, and our VLOOKUP function returns 250, which is correct. But that's a bit tricky to do, that VLOOKUP, because we're having to look up the category in the first column of the whole table, and then we use the match function to match March with March up here, and we've got a little adjusting number here, and that works, but a bit tricky. You could use index and match as well. So what we can do is use a nested XLOOKUP to do the same thing. So equals XLOOKUP. Now I'm going to build this up, so I'm going to first of all just do an XLOOKUP which looks up depreciation in the lookup array, and I'm going to cheat. I'm just going to assume that it's always January's figures that we're looking for, so hard coded in January. So I'll press enter. Actually that's a bad example, depreciation, because it's the same. Let me do operating revenue at the top. Okay, so this is wrong because I've hard coded January in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an XLOOKUP within the XLOOKUP to return this array, depending on what's in here. So down here, let's demonstrate. I'm going to do an XLOOKUP by looking up March in this case in the months across the top, and then the return array is going to be the whole shebang, because it could be Jan, it could be March, it could be May, whatever. So it's looking up just the numbers, returning just the numbers. But that's all I need. That will return March, because March is in here. If I change this to May, then I'm going to get May's figures. So what I can do is copy this XLOOKUP, escape, and replace this hard-coded array, which is January only, by the XLOOKUP. Enter, and it now works fine. And don't need that anymore. One more check. Let's have a look at EBITDA in February. Is that correct? Where is it? There. Yes, it is. So there you have it, the new XLOOKUP function. For more Excel training stuff, including a free online fundamentals course in Excel, please visit our website.